here.
Seattle Children's wants every child to live the healthiest and most fulfilling life possible. That includes making sure children and teens are protected from COVID-19. COVID-19 vaccines are safe and will help protect your child from illness and hospitalization. This isn't about beating the odds, it's about changing them for all kidkind. Get your child vaccinated today.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Elaine Salkin, and I'm the publisher and CEO of ParentMap. And we are especially thrilled to have put together a consortium of the absolute best parenting media in the country from our perspective. We welcome Chicago Parent, Metro Family in Detroit, New York Family, and New Jersey Family. And we collectively bring you the 2022-23 Parent Ed series. So thank you for joining us today for Parent Ed Talk Built to Last, The Surprising Secrets of Happy Couples with author and researcher Pepper Schwartz. And on behalf of this magnificent marketing team, parenting publishing team, we really feel like it's our collective passion and our business to help bring inclusive, safe, educated, and loving communities together for all of our families. We are laser focused on how we can better serve families, and being both parents and publishers, some of us grandparents, we never settle for the status quo. We hope you'll always give us feedback. We take it to heart. Before we kick off with Pepper, we want to just share some housekeeping items. Today's webinar is going to be recorded. We use that for educational purposes, and many people register, over 4,000 today, and watch it at their convenience. So everyone who has registered will get a link to the recording. We also want to hear your thoughts. The Zoom chat feature is open at the bottom of your screen, so feel free to share comments, and we will host a brief Q&A at the end of Pepper's talk, and we encourage you to use that. We also have closed caption at the bottom of your screen if you want to enable that by clicking on the CC at the bottom of your screen. Again, thank you to Chicago Parent, Metro Parent, New Jersey Family, and New York Family. And then a special thanks to our presenting sponsor in Seattle, Seattle Children's Hospital, and our Platinum event partner, the Gates Foundation Discovery Center, and to our event partner, Community of Mindful Families, which you're going to hear about a follow-up Q&A with Community of Mindful Families on the 9th. That information will show up later. Anyway, American sexologist Pepper Schwartz holds a Bachelor of Arts and Master's degree from Washington University and a Ph.D. from Yale University. She is an author, researcher, television personality, and has published 25 books, a new one to come, on the subjects of love, sexuality, intimacy, and commitment, including Love Between Equals, How Pair Marriage Really Works. Her newest book, Relationship RX, Prescriptions for Lasting Love and Deeper Connection, is co-authored by Jessica Griffin and comes out on February 13th, just next week. And Pepper is currently teaching at the University of Washington. So please join me in welcoming back our friend, Dr. Pepper Schwartz.
Oh, hi, thank you very much for that nice introduction. And I'm very excited to know that all these people are out there. I gather they're from very disparate places. Maybe everybody could tell me a little bit about where they're watching from. I get a more specific scope of who's out there. Just you could put in the little chat box and tell me your city or your country. I know that ParentMatch gets people from all over the world. Okay, a lot from Seattle, my hometown, New York, Detroit, Seattle. I'm good on the coast. That's really great. I appreciate it. Vancouver, Michigan. Very cool. New Jersey. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for weighing in. I really appreciate it. And I'm I'm honored and touched that there's 4,000 people who have signed up for this. So I'm hoping it's worth your while. I do know my topic is really important because, you know, I've sort of devoted my life's work to it. And I'm going to talk about the data that shows how important we are. But what I'm trying to do for the next 45 minutes and 50 minutes, and we'll have 10 or 15 minutes for Q&A, is to try and distill what I know about being a happy couple, going the distance, and what I think can sometimes work against that. But there's a lot that I want to talk about. And I think the first thing I want to talk about is just the acknowledgement that while we know relationships, and this relationship, you know, our partner, our committed partner, whether you're in a same or opposite sex couple, is the core of our life. But I think we don't often give it what it needs because we get very efficient. We use our time efficiently. We sometimes divide up what has to be done with the kids, with each other. But I don't think everybody says, gee, I'm just glad we are so efficient. I'd like efficient love. I'd like efficient sex. No, I think that's not our aim, which means that we really have to think about not only how we prioritize time, but how we prioritize our best time. And often with kids, it's imperative that they get most of our best time. And yet I will urge you to keep some of it back for each other. And I think it also is important to think about not just time, but imagination, which is, you know, are we being creative with one another? Have we, you know, learned how to be efficient and do this marriage or this commitment instead of thinking about new ways or ways to delight and surprise each other? I know we're actually more capable of a lot more than we do, but that's kind of how we all get by sometimes, which is getting efficient, figuring out how we do this particular thing, signing all the parts and forgetting about what we need. And that is being receptive to our partner saying, I want more time, or I'd like to change this up, or how about an adventure, or let's get away together and be adult only for the afternoon or whatever. So I guess I'm going to try and encourage you in that direction, to give time, to give imagination, to be open to an ever-evolving organism that is a marriage or a lifetime committed relationship. So let me move on from there and talk about a little data, because in fact, there are data on how important this is. The first one we know that's important is that it's very important for our kids. On the back last slide that I just showed, I just want to be on that point for a moment. It's very important for our kids to see a relationship that is loving and fun and connected. So when we talk about preserving and enhancing our marriage, sometimes people think, oh, well, that would be selfish because we have children or we have others to tend to. It's not selfish. Preserving that marriage, preserving that commitment is one of the best gifts you could ever give your kids. We kind of all know that, but then again, we have to apportion the time and the prioritization for them. So on this next slide that's coming up, it shows that everybody really knows what I'm talking about. It's not a question about knowing it. It's a question about remembering it. So if you look at this next slide, you'll see this is from a study that I did with a number of other people and a demographer, et cetera. You ask people, what's most important for your happiness? Most important. So you couldn't say, oh, well, these top 5 are. No, you had to say what was the most important. And you'll notice that by far, this is on 12,000 people, by far the relationship was the most likely thing to be mentioned, and men and women were pretty close. I think sometimes women think men don't rank it as highly as they do, but men do. So even things like career, money, faith, heart, health, children, they're all extremely important. But in terms of one's happiness, it's it's a relationship that stabilizes or destabilizes your life depending on how it's going. And of course, nobody's going to discount any one of these other categories. But in terms of happiness, the relationship is the foundation and has to be regarded with a lot of care and importance in their lives. So moving on from that, I would say that if we talk about the fact that we know it's the most important thing, you'll understand why I've been studying relationships my entire life, and that a lot of the data that you're going to see in the rest of this conversation is from a book called The Normal Bar, which was in fact a study that looked at 12,000 people, same and opposite sex, and we tried to take a look at what people did on average, and we separated the people from people who were not happy. I wish to say we started, you're not having your relationship, you're sort of happy, it's kind of sometimes happy, sometimes not. You're happy most of the time. And then what couple said, we are extremely happy. And so the data I'm going to talk about in this next few minutes for us is the fact that the extremely happy couples had some things in common. And so I want to talk about those things in common because I think they're really important for all of us to focus on. So let me talk about the first thing. The first thing, when everybody talks about it, is excellent communication. Now, the fact is, what do we mean by excellent communication? Let me break it down. This is the hard one. The first one's really hard, but it's listening well. All of us are, particularly us extroverts, and I'll sign up for, mea culpa here, are anxious to get our words in, and or our repost. Well, yeah, but they're talking, but you're thinking ahead of why you're going to make your point or why your point's better. To just sit back and listen, and show you're listening by asking questions as opposed to just receiving it. That actually is hard to do consistently. But in these very happy couples, they said their partner listened well and did ask questions and wanted to know more about their thought processes. Second thing we found out in terms of great communication skills is either they had learned not to interrupt their partner, or they were two interrupters, and when we measured their interruptions, it came out about even. So nobody dominated the conversation over time. We had them interact with us for hours, actually, solving problems, talking about issues, and we recorded them and coded them. And the fact is that, some styles are lots of interruption, lots of passionate talk, but nobody got drowned out. So that's the second thing to think about, that each person is getting their own time, and they're not successfully interrupting way more than the other person. And interruptions in general, particularly if you've got an extrovert and an introvert, are easy to get out of whack. So I don't say any of this stuff's easy, but it's important. Third thing is, no matter what you think, the one partner thought, the other partner said, yeah, I really feel heard and I really feel understood. My partner gets me. I know they're hearing what I say. I know they take in what I say. We may disagree on this or that. This is, you'll notice I'm not saying these people agreed on everything. They didn't have to agree at all on a lot of stuff, but they felt that the other person heard, and they felt the other person understood their point of view. Very happy couples. And lastly, of the fourth things that truly were emergent in the data is they felt they solved their problems. John Gottman, who is a colleague and a very good psychologist, did a lot of really interesting research. I could do a whole lecture on his research. But one of the things that he said started to make couples very vulnerable and fragile was they felt they never solved a problem. It just kept going on and on. it came up, do we move or not? What about your mother? I don't like the way you discipline little Sammy, whatever it is. It didn't matter if they had those problems. What mattered is if they felt they solved them, or at least any of them, that they had a pattern of eventually solving things. So these 4 things, when you think of communication, these are what my data are telling me. And, I'm a sociologist and researcher. Listen well, felt heard and understood, don't interrupt, or interrupt about the same amount. No one dominates what gets said or gets out. And finally, that when people have problems, they feel eventually they solve them. So that was the first thing, and kind of the, what I would say is the keystone of really important things. What's my second thing? My second thing that I've noticed was people had the ability to get over bad times, bad language, hurtful sayings, fights. I mean, everybody has stuff, right? But they said they could get over it. They did get over it. Sometimes really bad stuff. I mean, stuff that's hard to get over. First of all, they gave grace. They said, okay, you're mortal, I am mortal. You're fallible, I am fallible. They would talk about the human condition as one that was present in their relationship. They would also accept things that weren't okay and like weren't going to be okay. He's heavy. He's been that way for a zillion years. He's probably not going to be thin. I'm going to love him anyhow, or vice versa. She's corny. Those jokes just aren't great. I've just gotta, think of England or something while she's making them, but I accept it. There's actually a lot of research on the ability to accept some things that just aren't going to change. And I'm not talking about terrible things like violence or things that we all know shouldn't be tolerated, but just things that, if you were doing a smorgasbord of things to pick for your partner, this would not be on it. This would not be in the choices. The ability to forgive, to truly forgive, to say, you made a bad investment. It cost us, we had to move or something like that. I mean, I've heard these stories, right? But it wasn't, I forgive you. I mean, even though it messed up our lives, I forgive you. And finally, my saying is on this one, a really important thing is they felt they worked pretty well as a team when they had to figure something out together. There's minor and major things like that, but the fact is the major one is that you are not the problem and I am not the problem. The problem is the problem, and you and I are the team that's going to fix it. So we have a difference of opinion. We don't like where we're living, or we have a child that's not thriving in some educational area. It's not that you didn't teach them the right way, or you did this or you did that. It's more like, we need to fix this and collectively can do it. And they were much more likely to say that's the way they operated. So the ability to get over things, accept what you couldn't change if it wasn't, dangerous or malevolent, etc. To forgive each other for making some bad decisions or saying some bad things, even getting into bad circumstances that cost the relationship, and the ability to feel like we can be a team, we can work on things, we can get better. Let me go to the third thing that I think is important here. I mean, this one, there's an enormous amount of psychological research on it. Any of you who've been therapized, you've gotten this language for sure. That's you differentiate. I know this sounds funny because of course you didn't, but you have to know truly that you did not marry yourself. That's the first part. Why can't she be neater? Why isn't he more ambitious? Why? The fact is, you married somebody who cannot totally replicate yourself. And we like replicating ourselves. Pretty much the ratio of similarity to difference that most therapists and researchers feel is probably good is about 80% similar and 20% different. 80% that you feel like, oh, that sounds really good because I feel that way. I do it that way. And 20% different, like, look, it's this issue, but, something exciting, something different, something you complete me, that kind of thing. So when you understand that you did not marry yourself and that you're both very different people, you'll understand that being yourself and understanding it, having boundaries, their boundaries, those are the things that actually allow you to not be stifled, not to grow as a couple as you grow and understand each other as individuals. You could do a whole lecture on differentiation, but it's a really key part of this balance for happy couples. They don't expect the other person to be themselves. They don't want the other person to be themselves, and they like the ways they are different. And those things are the things that they have to solve together. Those are the puzzles they have to do. And when they do solve a puzzle, as I said in my last moment, they really grow. So what's my fourth point? My fourth point is the fact that you can know how to give love in the other person's way. Now, this is one of the most popular marriage books, I don't know, maybe of all time. Most of you probably know about the 5 love languages. I think there's more than 5, you may too, but the fact is what it does, I think, is tell us in a way that we really think we know, but we don't remember, is that what we think we're giving is not always received in the way we give it, because it isn't what that person really wants or understands for themselves. And so love has been a really easy way for us to understand that just because this is what we intend by something, it's to someone, it's not necessarily received because it's not what they want. It's not their language. It's not their love language. So the popularity of the 5 love languages is important because it tells us that what we need is not necessarily what the other person needs. What we give is not necessarily as effective as we think it is when we're giving, because it's not what that person would have ordered. So let's go over them a little bit. And I'm going to add one of my own, which I think was sadly missing in the original. So there's 5 love languages. The first is words of affirmation. So important. That one's so important. I'm going to come back to it. We want to hear good things about ourselves. We want emotional support. We need it. I'll give you examples. Come back to acts of service. Don't tell me you love me. Clean the kitchen for me. I'm exhausted. Check my carburetor. Don't let me, forget. Do the taxes. Something like that is so much more important for people who regard acts of service as important than it is to think that it's just words of affection or affirmation. Come back. Quality time. For some people, just be there. Sit on the couch with them. It doesn't have to be conversation, doesn't have to be witty, doesn't have to be sensual. It just give them presence. And let's give them presence when they're still awake, when it's not the end of the day, when it's not the beginning of the day and you're all running trying to get the kids out and do everything you have to do. Give the time that's precious and comfortable and awake. Awake's pretty hard for the pairs of young kids. I grant you that. But what that person considers quality time with focus and presence, or at least just co-presence. Gifts and remembrances. For some people, that's literal gifts. It's, diamonds, money, clothes, but it could also be chocolates, remembering to get the favorite flower instead of just the supermarket flower that you bring home. It could be cards. It could be that little, Hallmark card that somebody sent to you, or a poem, or anything that shows you were in that person's mind and surfaced, and it was about you, and it's special to you, and it is a gift. Touch and sexuality. This is one of the few that are gendered. Men are much more likely to say that their love style, the showing love, is getting physical touch, intercourse, sexual acts, sexual desire, even showing it, whereas women are much more likely to be over the other four. What's important about these is just that if you're giving somebody gifts all the time, but what they want are words of affirmation or acts of service or something, you're not getting the intended, pardon, bang for your buck. If that's not their love language. And I'm going to add one more love language that I think is really important to people, although there's probably more that many of you could think of and maybe you could offer them. But the new word is sapiosexual. Sapiosexual. I don't know how many of you've heard of it, but basically it's hearing something brilliant, smart. You turn on to smart stuff. You're witty, bright, clever partner. And also you really like when they notice that you're that witty, smart, clever partner, and it's complimenting you on the part of yourself that you're proud of stuff, or being in love with that person who says something so important and so smart and so wise. You go, gosh, that's why I love that person. You could think of other things as well, but I think these really do help to remember, like, does that person have the same love style you do? I've given couples an exercise where I say, rank these all, and I'll give a couple more, like putting in sapiosexual, etc. And you rank what you think your partner's order of importance of these is. And I will tell you for sure that when these couples compare how they rank these things, they're only 50% correct. Very few couples get it absolutely right. So talking about that is really important. Let me go back to words of affirmation. One of the things I've learned in my research is that people do not give each other enough compliments, admiration, and affirmations. It's something that seems to slide from the beginning, where you see the person in the beginning and you say, oh, you've got these beautiful eyes. I've got some, and you know, or you look so great today, or you know, I can't believe that you chose me. Those kinds of things. They slide and they stop being done. So I've got some examples in the next slides of the kinds of affirmations that maybe we don't think of, but they're really important. And the general sense of it is, I'm giving you some examples here, but the more, the better. You really can't overdo it unless it's not genuine. Your partner gets the idea that you've just checking list words of affirmation a day. You look great, honey. I mean, it's not going to work if it isn't true. But if it's a verbal compliment that you mean, you look great in that suit, or if you use encouraging or inspiring words, you know, when the person has said something that you really, really like, says, you can say, oh gosh, you're so great with words. You have a fascinating way of telling a story. I think you should write some of them down. A partner would love that just as much as anyone else. Showing empathy when the person tells you something, to really think about what it felt like for them and support them. You put yourself in their shoes and say, you know, tell me more about that. And as of course, as you probably heard in your various psychological readings, empathy isn't solutions. It's not trying to say, okay, I could solve that. I don't think people understand how unaffirming it is to say you can solve that when somebody's feeling like they couldn't solve it. You have to wait until you're asked for a solution. But empathy is always welcome. And kind words, you know, people get lost with their tone. I'm around couples a lot. I know couples speak to each other in ways that they really wouldn't want to be accountable for, wouldn't want to see in a playback. They're harried, they're busy. I mean, I don't judge people for all this. I just know the more we're cognizant of it, maybe we round the edges a little bit more. And some of those rounding the edges would be maybe not barking orders as opposed to hoping that someone would please do something or whatever. Again, of course, we cross these boundaries. The question is, can we get the ratio as good as possible? And I think the most important thing of these affirmations is to do it in public, to support, you know, we all hear the word, have your partner's back. Well, part of having your partner's back is complimenting their front, which is saying, my husband just pulled off this amazing tennis match, or she, was the person in her office that solved the entire problem, and then they didn't have to have the merger or whatever it is, or she, was great with the 3-year-olds this morning when I was about ready to, jump off a cliff. Whatever it is, to be saying that in front of others is particularly swell. And I think it's important not to forget that. Well, moving on, because I can't stay too long in this, but I just do want to affirm in the next slide that compliments are really important. And that I'm not just saying they're few and far between. In the study, we took a look at some of the data here, and we asked people to see if this was true or false. My partner hardly ever or never praises my appearance. 39% of the men in the general study said that. 24% of the women said so that's more than a third of men. At least a quarter of the women say they never get praised for how they look. If we looked at just the unhappy couples, those numbers go way up. 50% of the men said that, and 38% of the women. So it is something that seems to disappear in ways that maybe, the old joke is, why should I tell her I love her? I told her once, she should know. But the joke is also, you can kind of do it with a sardonic feel about it, which is, well, she knows I think she looks great, or he knows I think he looks handsome, but no, he or she doesn't. They actually really care to hear more. And I think the important thing is that that you'll see, and I'm going to come back to that men actually feel like they're getting less input than women are. And it's, one thing you can do, of course, is you could say, how do you think I look? They say, of course you look great. Well, how would you like to tell me that? Because I would love to hear it. A little bit of coaching might help the change. Let me go on and talk a little bit more to the next point, because I don't want to lose time, and I can see I'm going to be in trouble. Fifth idea is couples never lose their need for romance. I know there's Valentine's Day coming up, and everybody resolutely goes and gets the flowers and sometimes the chocolates and whatever. But the romance really shouldn't be down to anniversaries and Valentine's Day and maybe birthdays if you're being. I think the important thing is that you want to please your partner, are appreciated for being romantic from time to time, and not just because they're prompted by a holiday. The happiest couples feel that their partner makes an effort to look good for them. They feel that their partner takes care of themselves. And unfortunately, a third of the couples say they wish their partner would try harder to look good for them, to dress up for an evening going out, to not, go to bed in the sweats, whatever it is that we all do from time to time. The happiest couples feel their partner is still trying to be romantic, still trying to look good for them, still into their appearance being an important thing of what one of the gifts that they give the marriage. So that expresses itself in some of the data we have. In the next slide, you'll see that the happiest couples really try and work on keeping those feelings of excitement and mystery of the early relationship. This is something that I think is really important. Of our very happiest couples, remember, these are the ones that said they're extremely happy. 88% said they have a designated date night, usually every week. And sometimes they can't because of other things, but they're trying for every week. Almost all of our happy couples, gay and straight, take vacations as a couple. But 72% of our sample had never taken vacations together, which is just amazing. And in terms of gift giving, that was also very important with having romance, feeling there's a lot of romance in the couples. And interesting enough, people who gave each other gifts were also more likely to be sexually satisfied, or at least they are. So, you would think it's of course, people would take vacations and have date nights every week and whatever, but no, that too goes into less, into, less common. And is it important? Do people themselves think it's important? Yes, particularly men do. If you take a look at my next slide, American men, and this was an international study, and I'm not going to talk about all the other countries because we don't have time, but if we asked them if they were upset, if they felt that they needed more romance from their partner, very bothered how little romance there is in the relationship. Look at this statistic. Only a little over a quarter of women were, and you could say a quarter's too much, it is, but you're getting almost to half of the men were bothered by how little romance there was in the relationship. And when we asked them true or false, I feel deprived of romance, 30%, a third of the women said they didn't get enough, but almost 2/3 of the men said it. So let me talk about that a little bit. Why do we have this gender difference in terms of romance? And I think the reason is that it's all sort of like encouraged for men to give it to women, and women accept it and want it and like it. But I think that we feel that men only want sex, not romance, but it's not true. We made it very specific that romance was different than sex. It was feelings of affection, love, being catered to, getting special nights, etc. 62% of the men said they don't receive enough romantic gifts. And this is the one that I think is really important. Women are much less likely to tell their spouse, I love you, at least once a week than men. 90% of the men in this study who were happy couples, said they tell their partner at least once a week, I love you. But only a little bit of the happy couples, of the women in the happy couples, said they were likely to tell their partner. And women were much less likely to initiate the I love you. And women, of course, were much less likely to initiate sex. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. If she's not initiating sex enough, he's feeling unloved. He's coding it as non-romantic, right? Well, right, right. Remember, it's much more likely to be their love language. So she's thinking it's sex. I'm just not in the mood for sex. He's thinking she doesn't love me. She's not being romantic. She doesn't want me. She doesn't desire me. So it's one of those things where men and women tend to code that differently. And it's important to know how we do code it, because those women aren't saying they don't love him. They're just saying they're tired, or they don't initiate it because they're more likely to be, gendered roles. But moving on, because we got to get through all this, and I can see a problem. Okay, so going on, what is my sixth point about happiest couples? They reinvent themselves more. We are a species that doesn't like to do the same thing the same way all the time. The data's in for the length of our lives, and I do mean the whole life arc. We need adventure and novelty. There's some really interesting literature where they took three groups of couples who randomly came and said, we have trouble, we want therapy. So they gave one group of couples therapy, whatever kind of therapy they asked, classic talking to somebody, getting feedback. Then they had one group of couples they assigned doing them. What are your favorite things? Is it golf? Is it swimming? Is it fine foods? Is it movie? What is it? Okay, we're just going to do a lot of that to help you. The third one is they gave the couples new things to do together that they had to figure out. They, if they didn't ski, they had to learn to ski. If they didn't go to, if they'd never done pottery, they went to pottery. Etc. And which couples do you think at the end of all this said they were feeling that they'd progressed and they were happier? Without a doubt, it was the couples who did the novel things. I'm not going to say therapy isn't important. It's important. I'm not going to say doing the things you love isn't important. It is. But the things that we learn together and do and are new and exciting, that reminds us we can be thrilled by each other. I think everything is important. I don't understand why we don't take more date nights or why we don't have more romantic partners. Only 28% of our sample said they took romantic vacations, which they definitely differentiate from family vacations. Those are the two different things they could do. Whereas in France, as I said, this is an international study, France, Spain, Italy, the Romance countries, they always went out without their kids. The vast majority of them had romantic adult vacations. And who in our sample were most likely to take romantic vacations? Gay male couples. Of course, fewer of them had their kids with them all the time, but it seemed to also be a value that was much more important to gay male couples. So whatever it is, I'm just saying, you can't put the relationship on autopilot. I don't care how good it is. You have to still be inventive with it. Seventh thing I want to put in here, and I'm going to round the bend here because I'm almost only about 5-7 minutes. Equity is important. People have to feel it's a fair relationship. The taking care of it means, doing your share of the dirty work, not just your share of the stuff, but whether it's whatever it is that people don't want to do in their household, they have to feel like they're doing an equal amount of those kinds of things, not necessarily the same things. Giving credit for the person who always does the planning, the executive function, that tends to be more female, but not always. Anybody who's planning the trips, making sure the milk's in the refrigerator, all those things are some of those things that could actually deserve a compliment. The whole idea of sharing children and childcare. People's lives are so complex. I can't even begin to go into that, except that I would say that one of the things we found in a study, the dad was seen as a really good dad, a helpful dad, an involved dad by the women in the study, or whoever the partner was who was really good. That was one of those things when things got rocky, it kind of carried a lot of couples. Well, anyhow, moving on from that, I'm going on to the eighth thing, and then I'm going to spend, a little bit of time on that, which is basically sex. There are physical things that should not go away. I understand that kids get the way. Kids can be a great buzz killer, not just because they can interrupt you or they come into the bedroom. We could have a whole discussion on why I believe in locks on doors, but I'll leave that for a minute. People are tired when they have young kids, and they can be depressed and anxiety-full when they have teenagers or any kids that are going through stuff. The idea that kids get in the way, absolutely, and yet that must not happen to the extent where you start being roommates, because the fact is there's a lot of data say that when you have a good sexual relationship, any sexual relationship sometimes, the better it is for the relationship. If you take a look at the behaviors of extremely happy couples in this next slide, you'll see that there's lots of romantic stuff that goes on. They're much more likely to spontaneously kiss, use pet names, give cuddle, say I love you, all of that kind of stuff. But I'll tell you, that's not going to be enough. It's important to have those affectionate behaviors, but the fact is, taking the next slide, if you take a look at the happiest couples on sex, 42% say their sex drives are pretty similar. They're much more likely to have more frequent sex than other people. And I'm not saying that, it's honeymoon type sex, maybe a couple times a week for both older and younger couples. The younger they are, the more likely it's a little bit more frequently. And they're more likely to describe sex as making love as opposed to just having sex, or at least making love some of the time. Moving on with this, the other behaviors that they keep sexual passion alive for the happiest couples, about a quarter of them do role playing, not just, you're the nurse, I'm the patient, but it seems to be a fun way. 30% of our extremely happy couples say, of course, they role play. They're more likely to discuss their sexual preferences and techniques that they have during sex, not necessarily discussing them while they're doing sex, but some of them do, but they can talk about it. They can say, I'd like you to do a little more of this or that, or you're right near the right spot, but you're not really quite on the right spot. Could we, change that a little bit? Or I'd like to kiss more. Whatever it is, they're willing to do it. They're more likely to have more behaviors, and they're likely to have had some experience in some room in the house. We ask silly questions sometimes. Have you ever made love in any room besides the bedroom? And they're more likely to have done that. Sex toys are pretty common, particularly with the younger people. The really happiest people with their sex lives say they sleep nude with each other at least some of the time. What else? Going on to the next slide. What are some of the things that heterosexual couples in our study talked about that the happiest couples had? Men whose partners said they were more satisfying, engaged in more foreplay, engaged in more affectionate romantic behaviors, and were less predictable, more spontaneously, more likely to surprise their partner. Women who satisfied their partners the most, men said they liked diversity and newness. Their partners said they weren't passive, they were very active. And this is the one that I didn't expect to come up. Most men said they would just like to know what's going on. If they will give noises, if they will give any directions, they want to know they're doing a good job. So they really rated women very highly if they made noises that helped them know that they were being good at what they were trying to do. Now, it's easy to let all of this go. It's easy to fall into patterns. But what I'm saying is it's really important not to be too boring, because in fact, there's a lot of changes that go on with couples as time goes on. And what we found is that shift happens most between the 6th and 9th year of marriage or relationship. That's when things start to change. The hand-holding, the compliments, the affirmations. For some reason, this is a period that is, I think, very, that the relationships can get fragile because people kind of start doing things efficiently or just, let them go, both with age and relationship duration. But the 6 to 9 year thing is really important. Why does it happen? Well, here's the things that we hear. I think boredom it's in the next slide. Boredom's important, but I would say lack of communication, lack of romance, lack of quality time, all of those things explain what you just saw in the previous slide, which was how all of those things go down. Just go back for a moment, just to show you the actual shift of what the research is telling us, where this is just couples who passionately kiss, right? The good news is still 50% or so, 55% of the couples are still passionately kissing in very long-term relationships, but there's a big jump in that period right after the first 5 years of marriage. And yeah, I mean, there can be other life changes that make it less likely, but the fact is, why should we ever stop having passionate kisses in our marriages? So yes, there's all kinds of explanations. Of course, that's what keeps therapists in business, but the fact is we have an inner life that's telling us something too. And if you go to the next slide, past the next slide, one of the things about our inner life is that we have fantasies in our inner life, and those fantasies are perfectly normal and likely. But the fact is, they tell us that maybe there is a little bit of excitement that we should be manufacturing and not letting let go of. 43% of the men. Now, these are people who are happily married. 43% about the men in our study fantasize about having sex with partner's friends. About 43% of the men, only about a quarter of the women. 90% of men said they fantasize about having sex with people they met. Almost 2/3 of the women said that as well. And how many people fantasized about someone when they were having sex with their partner? More than half of the men, and about, more than 1/3 of the women. I think part of that is juicing up the relationship, but I also feel that if you think your partner's having fantasy about having sex with one of your friends, you probably need to have less good-looking friends. I don't know. No, I'm kidding. I mean, some of that's perfectly normal, but it does show that we're not, even if we're totally committed and totally monogamous, we can have issues that happen because we're human, and we need some novelty, but can often just keep it as imagination. sum all this up. The fact is, we do two things that are very hard to put together. For love, we need commitment. We need stability. We need to know we're loved. We need to know that person's going to be there forever. For desire, we need mystery, novelty, longing. And the two are harder to put together. If you're interested in that particular conundrum, take a look at Esther Perel's book. It's really good on that issue. But the fact is, as humans, what we just need to do is keeping our bond strong. Going into the next slide, I just say we need the romance to keep our attachment secure, to make sure that we know that we're not just partners, we're not just parents, we're not just a household, we're not just a survival mechanism. We need to keep the relationship a priority, because I do believe it's possible to have a vibrant relationship for a whole life. And the data tells me so. If you just go to the next slide, if you take a look, the majority of couples that we interviewed were happy in all kinds of countries. 3/4 of them would choose each other again. 3/4 of the marriages of these 12,000 people said they would choose each other again. And 70% felt their partner loved them more today than earlier in the relationship. So that's pretty, it's pretty wonderful. And I think that should be very encouraging. Now, if there are problems, we can solve them. And we will have issues. The newest book I've written, just a little plug here at the end, is Co-Relationship RX. And it's a book that I wrote with a woman who's a psychologist and a trauma specialist. We take a look at different levels of issues in couples and why we think there's often pretty easy exercises to get through them and to make things better. So I don't say that we don't have problems. I don't say anything's easy. I do think we can work as a couple and as a team to make life better and have a lifetime relationship that supports each other and our family. But we have to try. We have to put in the time and try. So there I am. I went a little longer than I wanted to. Be happy to take some quick questions, and forgive me for going over a little more than I wanted to.
No worries. We are thrilled. And I think there's just so much information. I want to say a couple things. First, we're going to pop up a poll just to get the official publications that people registered for. And while we're doing that, I will ask you the first question, which is, I mean, first of all, I think people get so hostile and resentful and they're busy. And I think we have to all take a moment and just have gratitude about having a relationship. Like, you don't have to look far to see people in your family or your friends who don't have relationships, and how lucky we are to even have them, number one. Number two, there's a lot of questions, Pepper, that indicate like people have such a hard time communicating with each other. Like, you can talk about a lot of different things, but sex and the desire to be more intimate is just feels like a logjam for a lot of people.
Well, we've not gotten permission our whole lives to talk about it. It's much easier for people to do it than talk about it. But that reduces its intimacy. I don't think if you're really making love to each other if you haven't discussed what feels best, what you could modify, what really makes you feel connected. And so I think it's hard to do while you're having sex, because then it could seem like criticism as opposed to just knowing each other better and pleasing each other more. But I think sometimes getting a book, reading it together, going over it, laughing at some of it. We wrote a book a long time ago called The Great Sex Weekend, which was going away for 3 days, and trying some things together, going through lists of things, yellow penciling what you thought was kind of cool, and putting a line through what you didn't. You could do that with almost any book on sex. If you go to a bookstore, there's a lot. I think trying is important, and I think it's, if you do these conversations and when there's a good moment between you, I think you feel like you grow more. I know it's hard, but I think it'll be done.
Good advice. How do you suggest couples move through resentment, which can be over a long period of time and chip away at all of these ideals?
Well, sometimes you need a third party. Sometimes you need a guide to say, this is a safe space. We're going to work through this. And you're both going to promise to not leave or throw up your hands, or to use this. You can't bolt. You're going to work through it, and you're going to trust this therapist. You got to pick carefully someone you both respect to help you do it, because deep-seated resentments can build up. They are walls. They are not easily deconstructed. And I would say the more difficult the issue, the more you might need a third party. If there's resentment over, let's say you feel you're shouldering all the household responsibilities, in a book like the one we wrote, we can give you a way of putting, lists of what happens, what has to be done, and how much time does it take, and did you even know that was one of the things that had to be done? That's something you might be able to work through yourself, so that you could, if you start to problem solve and feel you make some growth, the resentment itself will start to maybe get down to where you can manage it. If you're really furious inside, then you do need a third party to help you get to a point where you can be constructive. Because if you're really angry, you're not in shape to problem solve. You've got to work on that together so that you can get to a point where you want to fix things.
This is also a pretty, it's painful, but a frequent question that has come up. What if I have, I respect my husband, I love my partner. This is on both sides, male and female, but I've lost sexual desire.
It's a huge question. Some people feel there's some biology to that. I know some people, when they enter menopause, women feel like it's changed. But it may also be that you're not trying to look great for each other anymore. You're not being flirtatious. You're not doing things that produce desire. If you've gained 50 pounds, you can go, well, yeah, that's just the way I am, but don't expect to be desired for it. If you, don't ever get a beautiful suit or put on your, or go skiing in some great colored, jackets, and if you don't present in a way the way you would have presented before, you shouldn't be surprised that the desire is less likely. But desire can grow if you're really trying to please each other, and you go to romantic situations and I write books and books about this, so I can't be glib about it, but I'm saying it can be done. But you have to want to produce desire and to receive it. You can't, if you've not taking any care with being either flirtatious or how you look or what you do together, well, what do you expect? All
right, because Valentine's Day is around the corner. How about some not traditional, but some creative Valentine's Day gifts, more for men, because there were a great number of men on this that were asking great questions. So gifts for them.
Okay, a coupon book that you make yourself. Okay, this coupon can be used for 2 hours of dishwashing. This coupon can be used for one night of going out with your girlfriends, and I'll take care of the kids, or a girl see, or a weekend away at the place you've always been talking about going, or I'll go shoe shopping with you. I'll do that. Something that you wouldn't do, something that you're showing almost as a sacrifice, right? I'll be personal about this. My husband hates shopping, hates. So for my birthday, he said, I will take you shopping, and I will sit in the room and tell you what I like and what I don't. And you can bring in as many choices as you like. This has never happened before in the history of our 16-year marriage. So I'm just saying it was a big gift. Sometimes what you have to do is think about what that person would be surprised at and enjoy that is unlike you. And if you do it for Valentine's Day, and don't forget the syrupy stuff too, a piece of jewelry, a beautiful bouquet that you did not get at the grocery store, or at least mix a few so it doesn't look like it, or just something that's sweet. It goes a long way. But if you did something that showed that you're thinking of her and who she is and what she likes, and that you don't normally do for her, you got it made.
And for sure, we have more women on this, and I want them to challenge themselves to do that and then some more for their partner. So I want to thank you so much for joining us. We have captured a ton of questions that we're going to pass over to our friends, Yafa and the Community of Mindful Parents, families for the February 9th. There's going to be a follow-up Q&A. And then we really hope that everyone will join us. Our next talk is the shifting ADHD, ADD lens, moving from disability to ability, with our wonderful and frequent speaker, Edward Hallowell. So with that, I thank you and thank our sponsors and partners, and we'd love to have you back, Pepper.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.